We've all heard of women's intuition, right? Well, men have intuition as well. Intuition is so important when it comes to feeding ourselves and our families in our challenging food environment. This podcast explores a variety of topics related to a powerful, evidence-based eating framework called intuitive eating that integrates instinct, emotion, and rational thought. My hope is that it will help you finally break free of the perpetual diet cycle. This is the Men's Intuition Podcast. Well, welcome back to another episode of the Men's Intuition Podcast. Today, I am joined with a very special guest, Dr. Charlotte Markey, and she is a world leader and an expert in body image research, having studied all things body image, eating behavior, and weight management for her entire adult life, which is about 25 years. She's passionate about understanding what makes us feel good about our bodies and helping people to develop a healthy body image. Charlotte loves to share her body image wisdom with others and is an experienced book author, blogger, and professor at Rutgers University, Camden. Now, one of the cool things that I found fascinating is that she's written a book specifically aimed at tween and teen boys in this area called Being You, the Body Image Book for Boys. So I would highly encourage you to check that out. And we're going to be talking about some of the content from that book. Obviously not the entire book, but we'll be touching on some of those points. And yes, boys and men struggle with our body image as well. And so it's super important that we're able to and, willing to talk about this sometimes uncomfortable area. So without any further ado, let's join Charlotte here. So how are you this afternoon? I guess it's afternoon now, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, just barely. I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, I've had you on my radar from the beginning. When I first heard about your book, I thought, at some point I need to have her on here and talk about this because it's such an important thing for all of us. But I think in particular, sometimes guys overlook this area. And so it'll be great to talk about that. But tell us a bit about yourself, your work, kind of what inspired you and drove you to choose body image as kind of that key area of your research and work.
Yeah, I think I've been interested in body image my whole life, probably. I was a ballet dancer when I was young, so I grew up in a context where there was just a lot of scrutiny in terms of people's bodies. And I really internalized that, I think, from a very young age. And then when I finally went off to college, I started studying psychology. It wasn't initially my plan, but some of the content in an intro psych class really captivated me. And I ended up doing some research on actually eating attitudes in college. And I found myself reading more on these topics and just really, I think, sort of intellectualizing and probably working through some of my own issues and concerns that had started in those early childhood days, and then ended up going on to grad school to keep studying these issues. And I think at some point thought I would expand my research area more, and I've dabbled in other areas of work, but I just always come back to this. It's, I think, just most fascinating to me. It's really complicated in a way that's both good and bad, I think. And and it changes. So it's not the sort of thing that you just figure out, because then I think because it's such a social and cultural construct, our body image, that, we as the environment changes, as our social media worlds have changed, there's new questions, there's new things to try to understand. So I think this is what I'm doing probably for the rest of my life.
Yeah, well, there's plenty to do in that area. And I think, like you mentioned, social media and all of that, we don't even know what it's going to look like in 5 years, 10 years. The issues that all of us, our kids, are going to be struggling with. I think about when we were kids and we didn't have any of this, the social media stuff. We basically had maybe a bully at school and what kids were saying, and maybe, some kind of teen magazine, or we had TV and stuff, but not near the extent that we have today, and those influences that we have from all those different sources. And so, I'm sure you have plenty of work ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the amount of information that we have access to now is, of course, amazing. It's wonderful, but it does change development for young people in terms of having access to information that's good information and information that's, questionable at best in terms of its accuracy. So yeah, there's a lot to try to dig through and try to understand.
I have a feeling that's probably what inspired your writing of these books. The body image book for girls and the body image book for boys was, and heading it off maybe early, addressing it early on before you had to fix as
Yeah,
many issues.
yeah. I've written books and other articles for targeting adults, and I think in giving talks and things to adult audiences, it just kind of kept becoming clear to me that once adults are really struggling with body image or eating issues, it can just take so much work to sort of sort through those issues and for real healing to set in. And of course, it's possible, but it did make me think, gosh, could we just prevent some of this? Could we just get more good information to young people that maybe helps them rethink some of the predominant cultural messages about these issues um, and protect themselves a little bit better so that when they grow up, they feel more secure in their own bodies.
Yeah, I think that's super important. The earlier that we can address it, the better. And whether
Yeah.
it's body image, relationship with food, or really anything, character development, attitudes and behaviors around about others and work ethic and all of those things. It's, the earlier you can get to them, while the brain's still developing and it's more malleable and everything, then the greater chance you have to really make a big difference. So I'm super excited you have those books. So, but maybe you can tell us a little bit, what is body image? Because, we hear that a lot, but I think it's important we start off by defining what that is.
The sort of typical definition from body image researchers would just be how people think and feel about their bodies and their appearance more generally. But I think that that's somewhat oversimplified, and that our body image is associated with so many different things, ranging from health related behaviors to our interpersonal relationships to our mental health more generally. And really, I think it's much less about appearance and much more about how comfortable are you in your own skin. And we just know that when people are uncomfortable with themselves, essentially, they'll go to often very drastic lengths to try to become more comfortable. And so the ramifications of being dissatisfied with our body image are just really serious.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we see that in dieting behaviors. We see it in, I think, socially unhealthy behaviors that people get involved in, seeking out attention of people for the wrong reasons and those kinds of things, whether it be sexually or or based on popularity or, all kinds of different things that we end up doing as a result of that insecurity that you were talking about.
Yeah, and I think it's normal for us to have some
Oh
insecurities.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that most of us feel completely confident about ourselves all the
Yeah.
time. So it's a continuum, of course, and
Exactly.
we want to nurture sort of an appropriate amount of confidence and
Hmm.
security so that we can just be psychologically and physically healthy.
Yeah, yeah, you have to have some of that insecurity and dissatisfaction in order to be open to change too. When you think about it, if you think you've got it all together and you have perfect, then you're not likely to look for areas where you can change and grow and that kind of thing. So,
Yeah, and it's just humility, I think, right? Which
right.
is
Hmm.
important.
Yeah.
It can become pathological if we think that we're
Yeah.
perfect.
Yes, they have terms for that. So,
Yes.
what are some of the key? Yeah. Well, what are some of the key factors that contribute to our body image development in particular? I know you mentioned some of those things a little bit, but maybe some specific things.
Yeah, so I mean, most of us in early childhood are not uncomfortable in our own skin so much, right? We don't really spend a lot of time thinking about our appearance. Um, but surprisingly early, we have data increasingly looking at kids as soon as 5 or 6 years old, even. We become more sensitive to the world around us and to feedback about how we look and how others look that's present in the world around us. And so our understanding of how people should look ideally and how we should try to look is very much socialized. So it's not like it's genetic. We aren't born dissatisfied with our bodies, but we learn to be dissatisfied, and it's just to varying degrees for the most part. And of course, like we've been saying, a little bit of dissatisfaction or a little bit of discomfort is maybe not problematic so much, but the percent of people who feel, really unhappy with themselves, really uncomfortable in their own skin, is often in studies, the majority of people. So that's what's really troubling.
Yeah, and it just seems to be getting more and more, I guess, farther and farther away from the mild nature of dissatisfaction that I think all of us have had, since probably the dawn of time, and it just seems like more and more, because of all those other influences you mentioned earlier, that it's making it much more difficult to maintain that kind of healthy level of body satisfaction or dissatisfaction. Like I said, like we said, there's a continuum, and there's a certain level where you're not perfect, but it's not really unhealthy. It's just sort of, you kind of deal with it and move on, and you don't think about it that much and that kind of thing. But all those influences.
Yeah. I mean, between, parental, peer, romantic relationship, media, larger cultural forces, we get a lot of messaging in our culture about the importance of appearance in general, about the importance of looking particular ways. Those ways of looking are not achievable by the vast majority of people. So it's just really sort of sets most of us up to feel like failures to some degree or another in terms of reaching appearance ideals. And so I think we really need to be careful when people are young to buffer them from some of those ideals, to counter a lot of that messaging, to help young people sort through, the idea that how they look is just one very small aspect of who they are. And that this messaging often comes from consumer culture. So it's people trying to sell us things to a large extent. We're being sold a lifestyle often on social media, but we're also being sold very specific products. And so we want to, try to raise young people to appreciate that this is all pretty complex.
Yeah. Yeah. They really like to capitalize on our insecurities. And if you can make money off of it, it seems to be
100%.
the trend. Yeah. Well, in your book, you said that the latest research suggests that boys and men are concerned about the appearances of their bodies and related issues really just as much as the girls and women are. Has this always been the case, or does this seem to be a more recent development?
It's interesting. I don't know if we really know the answer to that question, because before the 1980s, there was really no body image research. So this is a relatively new field. The body image research grew up right alongside the eating disorder research, which also didn't exist much before about the 1980s. And so much of the focus in terms of the body image research for the really almost 2 decades was just anorexia, restraint. Of course, some looked at bulimia, but we were asking people questions about disordered eating that was more relevant to girls and women's experiences often. So if we would ask as researchers, boys or men, are you trying to lose weight, or are you, restricting how much you eat? Oftentimes the answer was no. And so then the research interpreted that as, okay, well, boys and men don't have a problem here. We're good, right? It's the questions had to evolve.
Mm-hmm.
And that really didn't start to happen until the late 90s. And when we start asking different questions about sort of general appearance dissatisfaction, are you doing anything to try to change your appearance? We start to get really different answers, I think.
Yeah.
And we see a lot of boys struggling with, wanting to be lean, wanting to be tall, wanting to be broad-shouldered, and also really wanting to be muscular. And
Yeah.
so if you're not asking about muscularity or height or something when we're, talking with boys about these issues, then you're just going to be left with the impression that, boys and men don't have these concerns.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if you're talking to boys that are in smaller bodies. That's the concern. They're not concerned about losing weight or
Right.
that kind of thing. They're wanting bigger, stronger, which is why there was a growing issue with use of anabolics and those kinds of things in younger and younger populations and that kind of a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. We see that a lot more with boys than with girls. And it's, I think, incredibly concerning, especially when you look at some of the recent data suggesting that, a growing percentage of boys, up to about 30%, have tried some sort of supplement or
Mm-hmm.
other product to try to bulk up. And we know that those supplements are not regulated.
Mm-hmm.
We're not sure that they're very safe for developing bodies. And so we really don't want young people to use them, especially when we're talking about something that's an appearance concern, right? This is not a
Right.
health.
Well, and it's interesting too, because prior to a certain age or a certain stage of development, boys can't develop certain ways that they're encouraged to by society. So society says, "Hey, you're a boy, you're a male, you're a man. You should look like this. This should be the ideal." And then you've got a 10 or 11 or 12 or even some 13, 14, 15-year-olds haven't quite hit their stride yet as far as development, and even older too. And they're looking at that thinking, well, I've got to do something because I need to look like this if I want to be accepted. And in reality, in many cases, their body's just not even physically capable.
Right. I mean, there was a study of 6-year-old boys in Australia just a few years ago that found at 6, about 50% of them were saying that they would look better if they were more muscular. But they're 6. It's not even possible, right? I mean, do you know any 6-year-old that's quote unquote muscular? Of course not. It's not physically possible. And so I think it's just really, mind boggling in some ways that young boys are getting this into their head. They're internalizing some of this. They're starting to even think about adjusting their behaviors, whether that be being more active or eating certain kinds of foods, even pre-puberty. And again, they're not going to bulk up. They're not going to look muscular.
Right.
Pre-puberty. It's just not really
Yeah.
how the body works.
Yeah, it's amazing the impact that all of this has on young people. And I think a lot of times as parents, it's really easy to just assume, hey, my kid's only 6. This can't possibly be an issue for them yet. I remember when I was a camp director back, gosh, this was probably close to, well, it was 25, close to 30 years ago, probably. And I remember we had a meeting with the counselors one morning, and one of them was, these were 10-year-old kids at camp. And one of them said that one of their campers came to them and said their boyfriend was pressuring them to have sex. And this is a 10-year-old, and the boyfriend was 10. I mean, in that same range. And it's just these bizarre kinds of things that you would never assume, you would never even imagine happen in young kids, but yet they do. And it reminds me of too, I remember reading research on rates of attempted suicides in 6-year-olds. I didn't even know that was a thing. But yet there are statistics on that and these kinds of things. So yeah, we should never really discount where kids are intellectually and what they're hearing and what they're processing, what they're internalizing, just because maybe they're not at a stage where they can express it clearly yet. And so that's another reason why I'm just so excited about your book and the slant that you took with it, where you really addressed it to that younger population, not a book for parents to help them with their kids, although I have recommended it for parents with kids and said, hey, maybe you can go through this and sort of sift some of it down to a more age appropriate for your maybe a younger kid who the book would be a little bit too old for. But I also like that you include the research and you talk to them as people, not children, like little kids. And so I think that was a really good, that was something else I really appreciated with the book.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I have to admit, when I put the proposal together for the body image book for girls, I was incredibly passionate about pursuing the project. And my own daughter was about 10 or 11 at the time. So I really was, thinking about all the things I wanted to tell her, right? I was thinking about her and her friends, and it felt very personal, not just professional. And when I first sat down then to start writing, I had gotten this book contract and I thought, wait, how do I write for kids this age? I've never done this
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
And so I'm always feel really reassured when people say positive things about the approach, because I really spent a lot of time thinking about it, talking to kids that age. In all these books, I focus group the material. I ask professionals and kids and parents to look at it and to, tell me what's not clear. Tell me what your questions are. I really try to think through what sort of this age group wants and what they're capable of. But I also think we really, as adults, sometimes do underestimate kids. I mean, they can, if you put it in appropriate language, they can take in quite a bit. And I think that you lose a lot of credibility with especially tween and teens if you are at all condescending or talk down to them. So very much I wanted to try to be a voice of reason, but also um, meet them where I hope they're at or where they're almost at in terms of their understanding and language skills and cognitive development. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that was great. Well, have you found any stigma associated with men and boys when it comes to sharing their feelings about their body image, maybe in some of the conversations that you had when you were interviewing people and that kind of thing?
yeah, it's still sort of fascinating to me that when I interviewed girls in their teens and 20s for the body image book for girls, as just part of regular research protocol, I always ask girls, and if they're under 18, their parents, to sign a consent form and to indicate that, they're not being coerced in any way. This is completely voluntary that they're talking with me, that they understand I will use their information in my book and that I will not use their real name. So we get that all, in writing. And then I also ask on the same form, is it okay if I acknowledge you by your real name, though, in the acknowledgement section? So there's no way for people really to link that name with any of the content in the book. But I just, I like I said, I involve a lot of people in the writing process, the different stages. And I mean, these are team efforts. I like to acknowledge that. I think that's really important. And with the girls, all of the girls I spoke with and young women, they said yes, and their mom said yes, sure, yes, of course, acknowledge me. And when I interviewed the boys, about half of them said no. They were willing to talk with me, but they didn't want their real name in the book. They didn't want to be like associated with the topic. And I don't think it was anything personal. I think it very much was that we feminized these topics for so long that even though boys are saying like, yeah, I have these concerns, and those conversations were somewhat stilted often. So they were much more work to talk with the boys versus the girls who are well practiced. It seemed 10 out of 12, they're well practiced. And the boys, those conversations went differently. But still, I was, sort of amazed. And, one of the boys was a good friend of mine's son. And I even remember sending her a text and saying, like, just so you know, when this book comes out, I want to acknowledge and appreciate your son, but he asked me not to. So I am using some of his information, but I don't want you to think I forgot him in the process. And she was like, oh, weird. Okay, well, whatever. But I just felt like I don't want people to think I'm not giving them credit sort of for their ideas and their thoughts and sharing their experiences with me. Um, and and yet I think it really does just speak to the fact that boys feel kind of uncomfortable talking about these issues. They don't want to be associated with them. And we really need to do a better job of normalizing the fact that most people, regardless of their gender, have some of these concerns. And we
Yeah.
need to communicate better about, well, then how do you deal with those concerns?
Exactly. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I've really made it a point to be as open and vulnerable as I can with content that I share or talk about on the podcast, and often talking with clients and that kind of thing. Since I work mostly with men and kids and that kind of thing too, but yeah, it's just so important to see that modeled because it hasn't been as much. But it is nice to see more men coming out. I think from this younger generation, that's one of the things that I think has been really positive to see. I'm involved in Ninja Warrior stuff, so when I'm still currently rehabbing my shoulder, but in January I get to start back with that, and so I follow a lot of those guys, and one of them's a really big name in it, and I mean he's very
Uh-huh.
public, so I'll mention his name. It's Flip Wilson, but he had gone through a traumatic abusive situation as a younger person, and at one point just recently, like in the last couple of years, he really decided he needed to come out and use his platform. And so he's been extremely vocal about that. And it's been really cool to see that because he's a cool guy. He's a stunt man. He's all this stuff. And yet he's talking about this. And we're seeing it with athletes and stuff too.
Yeah.
And so I think that's been really good to see more of that and hopefully more of that happens, more guys will be seeing, hey, look at these guys. These guys are willing to do it. And so maybe they'll be a little more comfortable in doing that too.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And this isn't just about body image, as I think you're suggesting that we have sort of a long history of socializing boys and men to think that being manly means being stoic or not saying very much or not necessarily being very communicative. And yet those qualities are not conducive to maintaining emotionally intimate relationships, right? And I think most of us want for the boys and men in our lives to have closeness in their relationships, whether it be with family or friends or romantic partners. And so we really need to, I think, do a better job of explaining that vulnerability is not always bad and that communicating is important and that sharing your feelings and sharing your concerns is just a part of what makes us human and allows us to connect with other people. So this isn't just about body image per se, but about mental health more generally and about our
Mm-hmm.
relationships with others.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Well, in one of the early sections you of your book, you suggest focusing on functionality. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that. What does that mean, and what are some ways that we can do this?
Yeah, so in so much of the body image literature and our cultural discourse about these issues, the focus is on appearance, right? So if you're satisfied with your body, you like how you look, essentially. And yet we know from the science that there's much more to this. And in some ways, the antidote to this hyper focus on appearance is really thinking much more about the body in terms of what it does. It allows us to live our lives, right? In many ways, our body is just sort of the home for our soul, our mind, our spirit, however you want to conceptualize yourself. But without this sort of physicality, we wouldn't be able to live our lives, right? And so what is that functionality, right? I mean, on the one hand, it may mean running fast, right? Or it may just mean breathing and sleeping and talking and communicating with people. And so, what does our body do? And can we honor and respect what it does? And can we think more about that as opposed to thinking so much about how it looks? Because at the end of the day, I think some of the most important people in history, some of them I don't even know how they look, right? How did they look? I don't know. I mean, you kind of had like a drawing in a history book maybe as a kid. We don't really know. That wasn't what was most important. What was most important about many historical figures is what they did and, how they changed the world in some way. And of course, we're not all going to change the world dramatically. We're not going to all end up in history books. And that's absolutely, I think, not the goal necessarily. But the goal should be to appreciate that living our lives and being who we are, we need the body to get us through our lives, but do we need it to look a certain way? Not really.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's really important. the functionality aspect is a very practical thing that we can, and I think that's a nice concrete thing that we can focus on with kids also. And that's
Yeah.
in my work with parents. That's one of the things that I try and encourage them to do, is to really encourage and focus on those aspects. If they may have concerns about their child's weight for whatever reason, or their health, but yet those things are so much more out of our control. But in many cases, we can provide those opportunities for them to engage in different activities that bring out the functional aspect of their body, that shows what they're capable of doing, that allows them to experience different things in in life. And I think one of the important things too for parents to get from that too is to find things that your kids do well and enjoy well, because then that will because I think and maybe you can talk about this a little bit, but does our ability to do different things reflect on our body image? So, our capabilities, does that have anything to do with our body image?
Yeah, of course. And a lot of this research does focus on athleticism, because we see that, being athletic and really capable can have some body image positives, but it also can be problematic depending on what kind of sport you're in and what the expectation is. And, we've been hearing a lot more about athletes and eating disorders and mental health problems. So being, like a famous athlete is not always good for mental health, it appears, much less body image. But yes, enjoying your body, doing things with it, wanting to take care of it because it allows you to do things you enjoy. Maybe that is some sort of dance or even something artistic. That does seem to be really important for young people. And it is, like you said, it's something very concrete. We can socialize kids to think more about, as opposed to drawing their attention to their appearance.
Yeah, definitely. Well, this is something that comes up. I think it's come up a lot more over the last few years, especially as people are more aware of some of the social justice work that's been done, and stuff that's been brought more to the surface, where people are starting to become a bit more careful in the way that we talk about or assume that everybody is this able-bodied person and we only speak to them, and come up with these ways of saying, oh, well, just go out and walk, and go out and do this,
Right.
and go out and be more active, and just hit the gym a couple of times a week. And nothing wrong with that. I mean, that's good advice for certain people, but
Mhm.
yet for others, that can be kind of problematic. So what about those who may not have typical levels of functionality, whether it be physical or mental, that's completely unrelated to their shape or size? And, when we were talking about this, the outline for this, I shared how this one hits home for me personally, with a wife who struggles with chronic pain and illness. And, I was reading a really interesting paper this week where the authors were looking to address the question, are individuals apt to experience positive body image when they are less physically able, or when pain interferes with their experience of their bodies? In other words, is positive body image possible when individuals are experiencing something they perceive to be wrong with their bodies? Are you familiar with this paper by any chance?
Yes, well, yes, that does sound familiar. Um, yeah, I mean, this is a personal interest of mine as well, as I told you. Not to the extent to which I think it's touched your life, but as someone who's dealt with some chronic pain and chronic illness as well, I thought it was really interesting to consider. So I was somewhat motivated, selfishly, in pursuing this study and trying to think about, well, yeah, I love this idea of functionality as like sort of the opposite of appearance. So let's talk about functionality. But then, some of us do have days where we feel even anger at our bodies. We feel betrayed by our bodies. We feel like our body is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. So is it really so helpful to think about the functionality? And, I can't claim that I have all the answers to these questions. What came out of that one study in particular, though, was the importance potentially of people having some acceptance around their physical limitations, and that acceptance then being, I think, enabling in terms of positive body image. And I think that this is really challenging. I don't think there's enough research at all about pain in general, about chronic illness. There's more than there used to be. And it is something I hope to pursue a little bit more in the future, because as we have an aging population and more people are affected by chronic pain and chronic illness. And for a while, doctors thought that like everyone was just going to be okay because opioids weren't addictive and that would just take care of things for a lot of people.
Yeah.
That plan worked out really poorly, it turns out.
Yeah.
Um, so, I think we're at a place sort of in our history of thinking about these issues, sort of from a medical and psychological community standpoint of like, okay, well, how do we deal with things now, right? Like people are living longer. People are more apt to experience disability in some way, shape, or form during their lifetime because we can keep people alive pretty well with all the medical advances we have, but we can't necessarily keep them free of all pain and all illness while they're alive. And, with an aging population and more medical advances, this is going to become only more common. And so how do we feel comfortable in our skin when maybe we feel sort of betrayed by that sort of, figurative skin? And I remember at some point in my own journey of dealing with chronic illness, someone suggesting that I needed to sort of accept this. And at the time thinking it was just really crazy because it was like, no, I'm not going to accept that this is my life now. I need to find more answers. I need to find more treatment. I need to pursue more, medical professionals. I'm not getting help. Um, and and I think that to a certain extent that's right because our medical system in the U.S. is pretty dysfunctional, and oftentimes if you're ill, you do need to really do your own research. You do need to go after your own help. Um, and I don't know exactly how one balances that with also accepting that your life is forever changed, right? Because I think that there's some of both that's necessary and adaptive, right? Like you need to, yes, get treatment. Don't suffer unnecessarily. Um, but on the other hand, appreciate that all of us age, all of us experience illness, all of us will have something quote unquote wrong with us. That doesn't necessarily mean that we aren't functional in ways that are meaningful and important. Can we still communicate with other people? Right. Or, maybe you can't run anymore because you now have bad knees, but can you walk? And is that, essentially just as good? So how do you adapt? How do you change? And I think part of how this fits into the conversation about body image is that there's so much emphasis culturally on sort of not aging and always looking the same. And, even if like women have babies, they're supposed to just sort of recover right away and look how they did before. And I think that we need a lot more dialogue about, no, it's normal for your body to change across time. And it's even normal for your body to suffer from pain and illness across time. Um, so I do think that some of the body image advocates are working on some of this conversation and making it more common for people to say, like, no, of course, when you're, in your 40s or 50s, you shouldn't look like you did in high school. Like that's
Yeah.
not normal. That's not how it
Yeah.
works for normal people. That may be what you see on Instagram, but that is not normal. And I'm using the word normal very loosely here, of
Yeah.
course. Maybe typical is the better word.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important point. And just for clarity, I was being kind of a little funny with the way I introduced that topic, but Charlotte's actually the author of that paper that with a couple others who that paper that we were talking about there. So so that was really interesting. So one of the things in that paper though that I thought was really interesting when I was reading through it was that it was more about the acceptance that seemed to have the associations with a positive body image than it was making the pain not be as strong. So it had more to do with accepting where you were, what your capabilities were, what your what your new, your quote, new normal, that kind of typical thing that people talk about, accepting that
Yeah.
and then moving forward rather than dwelling on the negative aspects. And I kind of think of that in the same, kind of with my wife's situation. Her stuff started up about a month after we got married back in 2013. And so we went from what we were expecting our marriage to look like, and then a month later, it took a dramatic turn. And there has been a period of adjustment to get to where it's sort of accepted that now it's our normal. And I often joke with some of my clients, because I'll be sitting in an emergency room or outside in a hospital area, and they're like, "Where are you?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm at the hospital. My wife's in the ER again." And it's just this normal kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And yet we're just kind of carrying on our day-to-day life. And I found that once I accepted that and just worked it around my life, that it made it much easier. I wasn't dwelling on, "Oh, I can't believe I'm at the hospital again. Oh, I can't believe we can't do this. Oh, we had to cancel that." And so anyway, that was kind of the key thing in that paper, wasn't it, that you all found?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's also, really interesting because there's some research that suggests that cognitive behavioral therapy is valuable in chronic pain and chronic illness management. And I think that's relevant to this part of our conversation, and that it really is addressing sort of the thought processes around disease and pain, that it's not necessarily addressing, like, you need to sleep more, although that can come in and that can be relevant. But a lot of it that's sort of more unexpected, I think, in this newer research, is that if we catastrophize, right, or, really, as you say, sort of dwell on the experience and, wake up every day feeling like sort of betrayed by the universe or betrayed by our bodies, it turns out that can be really maladaptive. It may be impossible to avoid some of that initially, right, as you go through a transition. Would never suggest that people should just, like, rebound right away after getting devastating health news. I think that there is often some mourning and some fighting and some working for resources and working for treatment. And like I said, I think some of that can be important and necessary. But I also do think that this sort of psychological piece of it is understudied and often misunderstood. And, the upside of having more people in this situation with an aging population is that there will be more incentive for healthcare providers and research scientists to address these issues. So I do hope in our lifetime, and for the sake of you and your wife, that trying to understand sort of the psychology of all this and how to help people cope is the focus of more work. Because, again, it's our bodies were not necessarily meant to last, 100 years or even 90 or 80 years. It wasn't that long ago that our life expectancy was more like 35 years. So, and then we wonder now why people say at 40 things go downhill or whatever. Well, a generation ago, or a few generations ago rather, none of us would have even made it to these ages.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, it's really interesting to see how that changes, and it kind of really puts things in perspective too when we start to think about it in that way.
Yeah, I think so. And it helps, just the way we think about some of these issues when it comes to our psychological and physical health, the way we frame things can really be transformative in terms of our coping.
Yeah. Yeah, well, while my audience is made up of a broad range of people, I'm really trying to reach, as I kind of mentioned, and as you've seen on my social media platform, as many men as possible, kind of in this space that it's often seen more as an issue for women.
Yeah.
While these things are probably kind of, they really apply to any gender. What are some things that we guys, as husbands, fathers, grandfathers, uncles, coaches, I'm trying to include everybody in there, because it's not just dads that have influences on our children. What are some things that we can do to help develop a healthy body image? Not only in boys though, but I guess this would be a time to go ahead and say, in general, what for boys, maybe if anything comes to mind, but also with girls. just really all young people.
I think it's really important how we model these things as adults. And if we, place a great deal of emphasis on our own appearance and trying to modify our own appearance, then our kids are going to learn that that's expected or adaptive. I would think we really want to get kids to question and challenge our appearance and consumer culture. And, when it comes to boys, another piece of this is, how are we talking about masculinity, right? Are we talking about masculinity as defined by strength? Are we giving boys the impression that developing those muscles is an important part of becoming a man? And in contrast, when it comes to girls, are we giving them the impression that they need to become smaller, that they need to become more meek, that they need to say less, right? That they need to not sort of realize their full selves. And
Yeah, or not worry about becoming physically strong like you would. It's like, oh,
right,
it's okay for you not to, but since you're a boy, you
right,
need to. Yeah.
right. Yeah. And so I think too, just, so how we talk with and model surrounding these issues is pretty essential. And we want our kids to have a healthy relationship with food. We don't want to restrict them from foods and make them feel like this is this challenge to avoid certain foods or do anything that's going to be just really counterproductive when it comes to having a healthy relationship with food. And we want our kids to be active if it's possible, again, in things that they enjoy, right? It doesn't have to be a competitive sport at all. Um, and I think for young people, but perhaps for all of us, that we need to make sure we're using social media for good and media in general, right? I think that there are some really valuable um, facets of the media in terms of allowing us to access information and connect with people and communicate psychologically healthy values. There's also a lot of misinformation out there, and kids especially have a hard time determining what's misinformation, what's healthy, and what just is appealing or provocative because it's flashy and exciting. And so I think we need to, work on media literacy with kids. I wish media literacy was just taught in, like all middle schools, if not even younger. That would be one of my, dreams if I could just change the world, because I think that media isn't going anywhere. So how do we how do we use it for good? How do we help young people, use it for good? So that's kind of a lot. And this is all, in the books in a way that's meant for kids to read and understand, but also sometimes adults can read along and understand and think through some of these issues a little bit differently too.
Yeah. Well, it was funny when I was reading the book. And by the way, I actually bought your book twice because the first I buy my books on Kindle, and I don't read a lot of books. I'm just not a big book reader. But when I find a really good one, then I'll buy it. Well, we had kind of an issue where my wife thought we got hacked and something had happened, and so she hastily closed our Amazon account and didn't. And I was like, "Where'd all my books go?" And I didn't
Oh
realize that
no.
they were all tied. So, and yeah, I couldn't get, so she completely closed it. So anyway, I had to buy your book again, but it was okay. It was worth it. But,
That's very generous of you.
yeah. But, as I was reading it, I thought, this would be a really good book, I think, for a lot of us grown men. Just put a different cover on it, change the title, and don't even change the text of it. And if guys would probably be reading this, and us men would think, hey, this is the greatest book for men.
It's interesting you say that. The book I'm working on right now is really intended to pick up where these books left off. So, our sort of target readership for these books was like about 10 to 15 for, good readers or really interested kids, even younger, I think. And so the book I'm working on right now is tentatively titled Adultish, the Body Image Book for Life. And the target readership is like 16 to sort of into your 20s, like as you're transitioning to becoming an adult. And I hope it has broad enough appeal that even some full-fledged adults will find a lot of it interesting. So it's the same general content in terms of what the chapters cover, everything from physical activity to, some basic nutrition information to obviously then a lot about how to nurture a positive body image. But it's just a deeper dive into all of those topics. A little more information. Some of the language is a little less simplified. It's getting really long too.
Yeah.
Because they weren't really. I wouldn't say that they were short. I'd like to think they were accessible books for kids, but I wouldn't say they were short. I mean, they were pretty thorough, I think. And so then when you're adding in more nuance and more detail, I'm pretty sure when my editor gets her hands on this, she's going to be cutting out. Definitely not asking to add anything, but again, the point I'm trying to make is that I do think that, even though developmentally some of these concerns really emerge in sort of this prepubertal time, early puberty, they don't go away then. We know that. These are persistent concerns for many adults, the majority of adults. And so I'm going to try to do my best to keep writing for them as well.
Well, that's cool. That's exciting to hear. I'm looking forward to when that comes out. And hopefully they'll be able to whittle down the 1,300 pages that you've probably written so far.
Right.
I'm one of those kind of people who tends to be a bit verbose when I'm writing things or doing something. And okay, I need to trim this way down.
I know. Well, when it comes out, make sure you just send me a message and I will get you a complimentary copy so you don't have to keep buying these.
Oh, happy to support it. So, well, where can people get in contact with you, follow your work, follow what you're doing kind of on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, the easiest thing to do is just go to thebodyimagebookforgirls.com and thebodyimagebookforboys.com. I recently I'm on social media, but you can get those links on those web pages. And I recently have started a newsletter. I resisted for a while, but I'm on Substack now as well. And that's just under Dr. Charlotte Markey, and it's called Body Talk. So that's another sort of more regular. I'm working on just sort of a once a month kind of roundup of some of the latest science and what's going on in the world in terms of these issues. So.
Yeah, that sounds great. And so I'll make sure to include links to those in the show notes. So anybody listening, you can find her and follow her on social media. I always enjoy the posts that she puts on the various social media platforms. And then, of course, that newsletter. I just recently subscribed to it myself. So thank you so much for joining us. And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about this really important issue. And so thanks again.
Yeah, it's been great. I'm always so happy to connect with more like-minded people. And I know you're working hard in these spaces as well to encourage people's mental health and especially to target boys and men. And I just think that's so important. So thank you for everything you're doing. And I hope we'll be in touch across time as we continue this work.
Yep. You'll probably get questions periodically from me as I've done.
You gotta find me.
Yep, I sure do. All right. Well, thanks again.